I never thought I'd be writing a letter to a judge explaining why there's a half-finished clubhouse sitting in the middle of my cornfield, but here we are. The day I found construction workers on my property, hammering away at what looked like a gazebo on steroids, was the day I realized just how far Carla Pemberley, president of the Sunny Meadows Homeowners Association, was willing to go to get what she wanted. My name is Howard Zimmerman, but everyone calls me Howie. I'm a third-generation farmer who inherited 40 acres of good Illinois soil from my father, who got it from his father before him. My land sits just outside the Sunny Meadows subdivision, a newer development of cookie-cutter homes with perfectly manicured lawns and residents who complain about the smell of honest work when the wind blows in their direction. I was never part of their HOA. Never wanted to be. My farmhouse and land predated their development by about 7 decades. But Carla had other ideas about what constituted Sunny Meadows territory, and apparently, those ideas included my cornfield. It was a Tuesday morning in April when I first noticed the trucks. I'd been up since 5 a.m., doing chores and tending to my small herd of dairy cows. Around 9, I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy equipment moving across my east field. I figured it might be my neighbor Vernon borrowing my access road again to get to his back 40, but when I looked out, I saw 3 pickup trucks, a cement mixer, and about a dozen workers unloading lumber near my pond. I grabbed my hat and walked out there, still wearing my work boots caked in mud from the morning milking. As I got closer, I saw they'd already poured a concrete foundation and were starting to frame what looked like a large structure. "Excuse me," I called out to the closest worker, a young guy in a hard hat. "What exactly are you doing on my property?" He looked confused. "This is the Sunny Meadows Community Recreation Area. We're building the new clubhouse." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "No, this is the Zimmerman farm." "My farm? You're about a half-mile from Sunny Meadows." The worker called over an older man who appeared to be the foreman. He pulled out a set of plans with a map attached. "Sir, we have permits and everything. This is the designated area for the Sunny Meadows clubhouse." I took the papers from him and examined them. Sure enough, there was a building permit with an address that didn't exist and a crude map that somehow showed my pond as being part of the Sunny Meadows common areas. "These papers are wrong," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my land. It's not part of Sunny Meadows. Never has been." The foreman looked uncomfortable. "Look, we're just doing what we were hired to do. You'll need to take this up with whoever contracted us." He pointed to a logo on the paperwork, Pemberley Property Management. That's when I knew exactly who was behind this. Carla Pemberley had been the HOA president for 5 years running. In that time, she'd turned what was once a friendly neighborhood association into her personal fiefdom. I'd heard stories from folks who lived in Sunny Meadows, how she'd issue fines for grass being half an inch too tall or for having the wrong shade of beige on your mailbox. I'd had my own run-ins with her, too. Last summer, she'd sent me a letter claiming my agricultural activities were decreasing property values in Sunny Meadows and demanding I stop growing corn within view of their homes. I'd tossed that letter right into the wood stove. "I need you all to stop work immediately," I told the foreman. "This is private property, and you don't have permission to build here. Sir, we have a contract and permits. If there's a dispute, you'll need to resolve it with Mrs. Pemberley. We can't just stop." "You can and you will," I said firmly. "I'm calling the sheriff." While waiting for the sheriff to arrive, I took photos of everything: the foundation they'd poured, the framing they'd started, the trucks, the workers, and especially the paperwork with the falsified property boundaries. Sheriff Mike Donovan arrived about 30 minutes later. Mike and I went to high school together, and he knew my family had owned this land for generations. "What's going on, Howie?" he asked as he got out of his cruiser. I explained the situation while the construction crew stood around awkwardly. Mike reviewed the permits and frowned. "These permits are for Sunny Meadows Common Area C, but this isn't Sunny Meadows property." He turned to the foreman. "You need to halt construction until we sort this out." The foreman nodded, looking relieved to have an official directive. "We'll pack up for today." After the crew left, Mike and I walked the property line between my farm and Sunny Meadows. "The actual boundary is that old fence line there," I pointed out. "About a quarter mile that way. They're well onto my property." Mike shook his head. "This isn't just a mistake, Howie. Someone deliberately falsified these documents. The permit application shows a completely different property boundary than what's on county records." "Carla Pemberley," I said. "Has to be." "I'll pay her a visit," Mike promised. "In the meantime, you might want to talk to a lawyer." That evening, I called my niece Valerie Sloan. Val had graduated from law school 3 years ago and now worked at a small firm in the city specializing in property disputes. She was smart as a whip and took no nonsense from anyone. "They did what?" Val exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Uncle Howie, that's trespassing, construction without proper permits, and potentially fraud if they knowingly falsified documents. This HOA president sounds like a piece of work." "Can they actually take my land?" I asked, voicing my biggest fear. "Absolutely not," Val assured me. "The property records are clear. But we need to act quickly before they try to claim some kind of adverse possession or easement." Val promised to drive out the next day. True to her word, she arrived at my farmhouse early the next morning, dressed in a sharp suit that looked out of place against the backdrop of my weathered porch. We were discussing our options over coffee when a silver Mercedes SUV came barreling up my gravel driveway. Carla Pemberley emerged from the vehicle like a storm cloud. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair cut into a sharp bob and wearing what looked like tennis clothes despite the fact that it was barely 8 a.m. "Mr. Zimmerman," she called out as she marched toward my porch, ignoring the mud threatening to ruin her white sneakers. "We need to discuss this ridiculous interruption to our construction schedule." I stood up slowly. "Ms. Pemberley, I presume?" "This is my niece, Valerie Sloan. She's an attorney." Carla faltered slightly at the word attorney but recovered quickly. "Well, then she can explain to you that the Sunny Meadows HOA has all the necessary approvals for our new community clubhouse." Val stepped forward, all business. "Actually, Ms. Pemberley, I've reviewed the county records this morning. The location where you're attempting to build is unquestionably part of the Zimmerman farm and has been for over 70 years. It is not and has never been part of the Sunny Meadows subdivision." "That's absurd," Carla scoffed. "Our development plans clearly show that area as community green space." "Your development plans don't match county records," I pointed out. "And more importantly, you never purchased that land from me or my family." Carla's expression hardened. "Mr. Zimmerman, the Sunny Meadows community has grown substantially in recent years. We need amenities for our residents, and that location by the pond is perfect for our purposes. I'm prepared to offer you fair compensation for what is, frankly, just an unused portion of your property." "It's not for sale," I said firmly. "And even if it were, the proper approach would have been to ask first, not to start building without permission." "We sent multiple notices," Carla insisted. "No, you didn't," I replied. "And even if you had, notices don't constitute a land sale." Val stepped in. "Ms. Pemberley, my uncle has already filed a police report for trespassing. The construction permits you obtained appear to have been based on incorrect property boundaries. If this was an honest mistake, now is the time to acknowledge it and work toward an amicable resolution." Carla's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous. We've already invested over $50,000 in this project. The clubhouse plans have been approved by the entire board. We're not just going to walk away because some farmer suddenly decides he wants to grow corn there. I've been growing corn there for 30 years, I pointed out. And my father before that. Times change, Mr. Zimmerman. Sunny Meadows is the future of this area. We bring property values up, unlike." She glanced dismissively at my weathered barn. Val's professional demeanor didn't crack, but her voice took on a steely quality. Ms. Pemberley, let me be very clear. You have exactly two options here. 1. You can remove all construction materials from my uncle's property immediately and restore the land to its previous condition at your own expense. Or 2. We can proceed with legal action for trespassing, property damage, and fraudulent permit applications, which I assure you will cost the HOA significantly more than $50,000. Carla stared at us for a long moment. This isn't over, she finally said, turning on her heel and marching back to her Mercedes. As she drove away, Val turned to me. She's not going to give up easily, Uncle Howie. No, she isn't, I agreed. But neither am I. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. The construction crew didn't return, but I received a certified letter from the Sunny Meadows HOA claiming that my property had been incorporated into their jurisdiction through an amendment to their bylaws. The letter demanded that I comply with all HOA regulations immediately, including removing my unsightly farm equipment from view and limiting agricultural activities. Val laughed out loud when I showed her the letter. They can't just declare your property part of their HOA. That's not how any of this works. But Carla Pemberley wasn't giving up. The following week, a surveying team showed up at my property line. When I confronted them, they claimed they were resurveying the boundaries based on new information provided by Sunny Meadows. I called Sheriff Donovan again, who came out and politely but firmly asked the surveyors to leave. Later that day, he called me. Howie, I looked into those permits more carefully. The application included a survey document that doesn't match any official county records. Someone altered the property lines on the submission. Can you prove it was Carla? I asked. The permit application was signed by her as HOA president, Mike said. But proving she knew the boundaries were false might be tricky. Val suggested we file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further construction attempts. The judge granted it the next day, officially prohibiting Sunny Meadows HOA from entering my property or continuing any construction activities. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. The following Sunday, I woke up to the sound of voices and car doors slamming. When I looked out my bedroom window, I saw at least 20 people gathered near my pond, setting up folding tables and a large tent. Carla Pemberley stood in the center, directing everyone like a general organizing troops. I threw on clothes and marched down there, phone in hand already dialing Val. What do you think you're doing? I demanded as I approached the group. Carla turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman. We're just having a little community picnic. It's such a lovely spot. This is private property, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You're trespassing. All of you. A man I didn't recognize stepped forward. Mrs. Pemberley assured us this was Sunny Meadows' common area. We're not trespassing. She lied to you, I said bluntly. I have the property deeds and an injunction from the county court prohibiting the HOA from entering this land. Some of the residents looked uncomfortable, but Carla waved dismissively. That injunction only applies to construction, not to community gatherings. Mr. Zimmerman is simply being difficult because he doesn't understand progress. Val arrived just as things were getting heated. She parked her car and walked straight into the middle of the group. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced loudly, I'm Valerie Sloan, attorney at law. I need to inform all of you that you are currently trespassing on private property. There is a court order prohibiting Sunny Meadows HOA from accessing this land for any purpose. If you don't leave immediately, we will be forced to call law enforcement, and each of you could face individual charges. That got their attention. People started gathering their things, murmuring among themselves. Carla tried to rally them, but most weren't willing to risk legal trouble for a picnic. As they packed up, Val approached Carla directly. Ms. Pemberley, this is your final warning. The next time you or anyone representing the HOA enters this property without permission, we will pursue all available legal remedies, including personal liability for you as the instigator of these violations." Carla's face contorted with anger. "You think you've won, but you haven't. That clubhouse is going to be built, and this backward farm will become what it should have been years ago, a proper part of a respectable community." "Not on my watch," I said. After everyone left, Val stayed for lunch. We sat on my porch, eating sandwiches and discussing next steps. "Uncle Howie, I think we need to be proactive here," Val said. "Carla Pemberley isn't going to stop. She's invested too much of her ego in this fight." "What do you suggest?" I asked. "I think we need to find out how she got those permits in the first place. The county doesn't just hand those out without verifying property ownership." Val spent the next few days digging through records at the county clerk's office. What she discovered was shocking. "Uncle Howie," she called me one evening, excitement in her voice, "I found something." The permit application included a warranty deed supposedly transferring a 5-acre parcel of your land to Sunny Meadows HOA. "The deed has your signature on it." "My signature?" I exclaimed. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." "Exactly," Val said. "It's a forgery. And not a very good one, if you know what to look for. The notary stamp is from someone who retired 2 years ago. I think Carla Pemberley forged your signature and filed a fraudulent deed." That changed everything. What had started as a boundary dispute was now clear-cut fraud and forgery, criminal offenses. The next day, Val and I met with Sheriff Donovan and the county prosecutor, Elena Ramirez. We showed them the forged deed and all the documentation we'd gathered. "This is serious," Prosecutor Ramirez said, examining the documents. "Filing a fraudulent deed is a felony. If we can prove Ms. Pemberley was behind this, she's looking at criminal charges. We'll need to get handwriting analysis on the signature," Sheriff Donovan added. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation proceeded quietly. The handwriting analyst confirmed the signature on the deed wasn't mine. They also found evidence that Carla had accessed the county record system using credentials belonging to a former HOA board member who worked in the clerk's office. Meanwhile, the half-built clubhouse structure sat abandoned in my field, an eyesore that ruined a good quarter-acre of cropland. I had to work around it, which was more than annoying during planting season. Early one morning, I noticed a truck pulling up near the construction site. Thinking it might be Carla or her people trying something new, I walked over to investigate. To my surprise, it was Trevor Jenkins, the HOA treasurer. I'd met him briefly at a town council meeting years ago. "Mr. Zimmerman," he called out nervously as I approached. "I wanted to speak with you, privately." "About what?" I asked, suspicious. Trevor looked around as if afraid of being overheard, despite us standing in the middle of a cornfield. "About the clubhouse situation. I think you should know that not all of the HOA board was aware of how Carla acquired this land. That got my attention." "Go on." "She told us she had negotiated a fair purchase with you. The board approved funds for the land acquisition and construction based on her assurances that everything was properly documented." He pulled out a folder from his jacket. "These are copies of the board meeting minutes and the financial records. She authorized a check for $75,000 supposedly to pay you for the land, but that money never actually left our accounts. It was transferred to a project fund that only she controls." I took the folder, leafing through the documents. "Why are you showing me this?" Trevor sighed. "Because what she's doing is wrong. And now the FBI is asking questions about our finances. Several homeowners have complained about mysterious, special assessments that don't seem to be going toward any actual improvements. I think Carla has been using the HOA as her personal piggy bank for years, and this clubhouse project is just the latest scheme. This was bigger than I thought." "You should talk to my niece," I told him, taking out my phone to call Val. Val arranged for Trevor to meet with the prosecutor later that day. His evidence, combined with what we'd already uncovered about the forged deed, was enough for them to obtain warrants to search Carla's home and the HOA office. The search revealed a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Not only had Carla forged the deed to my property, but she had been embezzling from the HOA for years, skimming from maintenance fees and creating fake vendors that funneled money back to her personal accounts. The Clubhouse project was her biggest scheme yet, a way to legitimize large expenditures that she could siphon off. 2 days later, Sheriff Donovan arrived at my farm with news. Carla Pemberley was arrested this morning on multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Thought you'd want to know. I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. What happens to the clubhouse? I asked, gesturing toward the abandoned structure. That's for the courts to decide, but since it was built illegally on your property, you have every right to demand its removal. The story made the local papers, of course. HOA president arrested for fraud, built clubhouse on farmer's land without permission, read the headline. My phone rang constantly with calls from neighbors, friends, and even a few reporters. A week later, I received a visit from the new interim HOA board, Trevor Jenkins and 4 other homeowners who had been appointed to clean up the mess Carla had left behind. Mr. Zimmerman, Trevor began as they sat awkwardly in my living room, we want to formally apologize for what happened. Carla Pemberley's actions do not represent the values of our community. We've hired a contractor to remove the structure from your property, added Janet Foster, the new interim president. At our expense, of course. And will ensure the land is restored to its original condition. We'd also like to offer compensation for the trouble and for any crop losses you've suffered, Trevor said. I considered their offer. While part of me was still angry about the whole ordeal, these people weren't responsible for Carla's actions. They were victims too, in a way. I appreciate that, I said finally. Let's work out a fair arrangement. Over the next month, the half-built clubhouse was dismantled, the concrete foundation broken up and removed, and the soil prepared for replanting. The HOA paid for everything and compensated me for the lost crops. They even added a proper fence along the actual property line to prevent any future misunderstandings. As for Carla Pemberley, she eventually pleaded guilty to multiple felony counts. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison and ordered her to pay restitution to both the HOA and to me personally. I doubted I'd ever see that money, but the justice felt good nonetheless. The new HOA board turned out to be reasonable people. They held a community meeting and voted to build their clubhouse on land they actually owned, a vacant lot within the Sunny Meadows subdivision that had been set aside for community use. They even invited me to the groundbreaking ceremony, which I attended, bringing a basket of fresh produce from my farm as a gesture of goodwill. You know, Mr. Zimmerman, Janet Foster said during the ceremony, we were thinking of adding a small farmers market to our community events calendar. Would you be interested in participating? Our residents would love access to fresh, local produce. And that's how, ironically, I ended up having a good relationship with the very HOA that had tried to steal my land. Every Saturday during growing season, I set up a stand in their new community center, built on their own property, thank you very much, and sell my vegetables, eggs, and honey to the residents of Sunny Meadows. Val comes by regularly to help with the farm and check in on me. Last week, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the cornfield where the clubhouse once stood, she asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't noticed those construction workers that day?" I shook my head. Some things a farmer just knows, when rain is coming, when frost is likely, and most definitely when someone is building something on your land without permission. We laughed, and I silently thanked my father and grandfather for teaching me to protect what's mine, while still being open to finding common ground with neighbors, even those who start out as adversaries. The corn grows tall where the clubhouse foundation once stood, nature healing the wound in the earth just as time has healed the rift between my farm and Sunny Meadows. Sometimes the best fences make the best neighbors, especially when everyone finally agrees on where those fences should stand.